In the last few videos, I've been talking about a lot of mixing tips and tricks, so I just thought I'd carry on and talk about a really simple but commonly overlooked technique when mixing, and this is using reference tracks to try and improve your own mixes. This video is going to be split into 3 parts. I'm going to quickly explain what a reference track is, I'm going to give a few reasons as to why you might want to use a reference track, and then I'll try to show a few ways that you can use reference tracks to improve your mixes and a few plugins that will help you with this. So first things first, what actually is a reference track? Put simply, it's a song or a group of songs that you really like for several reasons, including the mixing, the mastering, the composition, the arrangement, the fullness of the instrumental or the clarity, any of these factors. It's music that you really, really love. It doesn't have to be the most popular music in the world, doesn't have to be top 40 or anything like that. It's simply beautiful music that you aspire towards being able to create or being able to mix in a similar manner. The idea behind this technique is that you look at these beautiful reference tracks and then you can compare them to mixes or songs that you're working on to see what your songs are either lacking, or maybe if there's too many elements or too few, or just general tonal imbalances in your mix. In just a minute, I'll show a few ways that you can incorporate using a reference track inside your DAW whilst you're mixing to help you improve. But first of all, why would you actually want to do this? What benefit is there to using a reference track and comparing it against your own song? To a lot of people, this will probably seem really obvious, but you want to listen to the reference track in your studio so that you can actually get an understanding of what a good mix sounds like in your mixing environment. Because a lot of the time when we hear good mixes, we're not necessarily in our studio. We might be in the car, might be in the gym, who knows where, you might be listening on headphones. You need to know what that mix actually sounds like if you were in your studio or home studio or bedroom and mixing it yourself. The second reason is something that I talked about in my hearing protection video. I talked about your ears becoming really used to the music you're listening to. So if you're listening to something with a huge amount of low mids and maybe it's lacking in the high end, you become very used to it over the course of a few hours, and that starts sounding like normal to you. So your ears have kind of adjusted to the imbalances in your mix. If you then listen to a professionally finished mix or one of these reference tracks that you really like, it sort of resets what the balance should sound like, and you'll immediately be able to hear that the track you've been listening to for hours just has way too much low, or maybe it doesn't have enough bass, or there's too much high end. It will start making all of these problems really apparent to you. And the third reason is just that it saves you time. If you have something to work towards, not copy, but if you have something to work towards, it's going to just save you time. You know kind of what you're aiming towards, and you can make decisions a lot easier to try and fit your track into that sort of mold. With that being said, you're not trying to copy the track. It doesn't matter if your kick drum doesn't sound the same, or your bass doesn't sound the same, or you're using a different snare. That's all completely fine. It's sort of like the general picture, the overall tonal balance, the overall width, the depth, the dimension. These are the sorts of things we're listening for. Now that we know what a reference track is and some reasons why we might want to use them, let's talk about how to actually use them. So first things first, you have to find mixes that you really love. They could even be songs that you've mixed in the past that you really liked, or they could be from up and coming artists and mixing engineers. It's just anything that really inspires you and the mixing that you really enjoy. So if you download the song and you pull it into your DAW, you can just put it on its own track and compare it to your song. This is the part where this technique starts falling down, because a lot of people will compare, but the finished track will be a lot louder and it's mastered. It can be really demotivating and sort of crushing to compare your rough mix to a completely finished and professional product. So you need to start by level matching, by taking the mastered version and just taking the volume down until it matches the rough volume of your track. At that point, you just need to sort of figure out where the verse is, where the chorus is, and you just A/B. So you just solo that track on its own, listen to it for a few seconds, maybe 5-10 seconds, get used to the overall balance, mute it, and then unmute your song and take a listen to it and just try to listen for overall differences. Now, you could do this in the session you're working in, or you could print out your song, pull it into a new session and just compare them above and below each other. And don't worry too much about things like exact details. Like, it doesn't matter if your kick sounds different, it doesn't matter if the vocal style is all different, you're just listening for the overall balance. It's highly likely that if you just use your ears, you'll be able to hear pretty big differences and start honing in on problems in your own mix and making big improvements. but if you're not quite trusting your ears, there's a few tools that you can use to help you out. And there's two I'm going to talk about here. The first one is the tonal balance tool from iZotope, which is pretty handy, and this sort of breaks down the frequency spectrum into bands, either roughly or fine, and it sort of shows you the distribution of frequencies, much like a spectrum analyzer, and it can show you whether you have a bit too much bass, a bit too much high end compared to many commercial releases, or you can listen to the reference track through that and see sort of what their curve looks like, and then compare it to the curve or spectrum of your own song. That's a paid for plugin, but there is a free alternative called Span, and if you set it up right, and I'll leave all the settings in the description box down below, you can run someone else's song through it in real time, and it sort of generates a profile that you can look at, and then you can turn on your song and compare it, and you can see whether there's any peaks or troughs that don't really add up, to see whether there's anything missing. As usual, it's always best to trust your ears, but sometimes having these extra visual tools can help you when mixing, but remember that it really does come down to your ears at the end of the day. So just because a tool says that you're in the right tonal balance, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be right for your song. As I said at the start, this really is a simple technique, but it is commonly overlooked because it's quite difficult to actually pull in finished mastered tracks into your session and compare them to your song. When I pull these sorts of tracks into the sessions I'm working on, it really can be difficult to face that your mix does need a lot of work, and often, you know, when I listen to theirs, it just sounds so good by comparison, but it is giving you something to work towards, and you need to try not be too sort of demotivated by it, and just remember that ultimately this is trying to raise the quality of your tracks, and it's not something to shy away from. So thank you very much for watching this video. I do hope it helped, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.
Always find a way to end.